India is considered a bright spot in the highly volatile global economy. And today, at the Zetwerk CNBC-TV18 Smart Manufacturing Summit, we speak about charting the next decade in India's manufacturing, growing India's manufacturing footprint, making sure our industry supply more to the global value chains has been a priority for successive governments. So what do India Inc. actually feel about the government's policies so far? How are they themselves preparing themselves for the future? And how are they trying to align new companies and bring them also on board when it comes to growing the manufacturing footprint and growing the pie? Joining us now to take this conversation forward, Mr. Anil Parab, whole-time director and senior executive vice president, heavy engineering, L&T Valves. We also joined with us Saket Chaturvedi, chief executive officer, HAL MIG Complex, Srinath Ramakrishnan, co-founder and CEO at Zetwerk, Ashish Khanna, president generation at Tata Power, and Sumit Isar, managing director, Mahindra Accelo and Sero, the vehicle scrapping company. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Parab, let me begin by asking you, when we speak about the next decade for India's manufacturing, we want to play a big role in global supply chains. There have been PLI schemes which have been brought in, FAME schemes, a number of schemes at the state levels. At the level of L&T, if I ask you about three pillars that you're working on in terms of preparing yourself for the future, for the next 10 years, what would those three pillars be?
I would say that the first most important pillar which is there is the Indian reforms. The government, whatever reforms they have implemented, that obviously has positioned India in terms of Gati Shakti, Digital India, Skill India, and the PLI schemes. This is creating a new demand which is within the country, improving the competitiveness. That's the one. The second pillar, which I would say is the geopolitics post-pandemic, has changed. And obviously, there is a big opportunity for India as a China plus. Also, the Europe is impacted. Not much is being talked, but Europe plus, because of the geopolitics, is the second opportunity which is there. And the third big opportunity is overall macroeconomics. India is seen as a very stable country with a good political, financial stability, with a visibility of 20, 30 years. All this bodes well for Indian manufacturing, I would say, to increase the contribution to GDP from current 17% to definitely 25%.
Mr. Chaturvedi, a good time for HAL. If I were to ask you about future priorities, and recently the Defense Secretary said that the capital budget for the defense sector in the overall budget may see a 7% increase this time. 40% of the orders may go to the private sector. What is the opportunity that you see for Indian defense manufacturing and Indian defense companies to rise, not just domestically, add to our Atmanirbharta in terms of security, but also supplying to the world? Because right now, there is a shortage of parts. Russia and Ukraine supply weapon platforms, components to all the major countries. And today, there is a supply shortage. What is the opportunity for India?
Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is the government's initiative, this has come at the very right time, and this is the need now. We can't depend on the other countries. As we see the whole world, the supply chain is affected. And uncertainties do not work in the defense. We have to be prepared. So there are a lot of opportunities, and aggressively we are working to make it Atmanirbhar, and the whole ecosystem is supporting us, and things are moving, and that's a requirement, and there are opportunities.
Let me ask you, Srikanth, what are some of the issues that you see when it comes to the startup ecosystem? There have been a lot of issues of the last 2-3 years or so. We've seen startups shutting down, right-sizing, laying off employees. What is the industrial roadmap that you see for yourself 10 years from now?
Definitely a startup like us, when we started, we were focusing on making in India for India. After 2020-21, our aspirations have definitely widened. We are looking at making in India for the world. Today, India definitely enjoys a favorable hotspot globally as a manufacturing hub. To achieve that, it requires proactive investments every quarter, every year for multiple years. And that is the direction in which Zetwerk is progressing today, in specifically identifying those niche manufacturing opportunities where India can be a global manufacturing leader. We definitely see that promise in aerospace and defense. We definitely see that promise in electronics. We also see that promise in renewable energy. And these are three areas where we are committed to long term investing, long term skill building, and long term capacity creation for not just for India as a country, but for the whole world.
Mr. Khanna, if I were to ask you, your priorities at Tata Power, the Prime Minister had spoken about 5 priorities of India when it comes to the Conference of Parties. We have given our commitments to the world on what we want to do in terms of energy transition, climate adaptation, and mitigating the risk to the climate. At Tata Power, how do you see this as a business opportunity, and what are some of the levers that you would really like to accelerate going ahead in the next 10 years?
I think from the environment standpoint, we were the first company, even before India adopted in COP26 about carbon neutrality. We were the first company before that to say that by 2045 we will be carbon neutral. On the renewable sector, we have seen multiple growth. I think as well as the infrastructure sector is concerned, in the last 5 decades, I have not seen across that sort of growth which has happened in renewable in the last 10 years. And Tata Power is very well poised to it with our manufacturing, which was there from last 3 decades, and that we are enhancing now. Also looking across from the thermal standpoint too. Technology is playing a very important role in this transition and adaptation of this technology, digitization which is required on the same, and bringing employability. I think if you look at all these aspects on it, this is the right time to be in manufacturing. This is the right time to be in renewable. This is also the right time to extract maximum out from your thermal assets. We need a base load too. As the GDP is growing, the energy requirement or the electricity requirements are also growing. So I think this is an opportunity which Tata Power is well poised to take full advantage of. And we are in all the sectors to take maximum potential acumen from this side.
Sumit, let me get you in. And Sumit Isar and Mahindra Excello and Sero are in a business which are connected to the entire industry, and that is circular economy. Vehicle scrapping, the steel that you generate out of that can contribute to everyone. What is the opportunity that you see when it comes to recycling for the Indian industry, and how do you see yourself contributing to each of the businesses that are represented here on this roundtable?
If you look at our business, which is primarily into the automotive recycling right now, the Sero, which we have a joint venture with MSTC, what we are looking at is with India producing more cars, which is right now 3rd largest in number of sales and 4th largest in terms of production in the world. And maybe another 3 years' time, we should be the 3rd largest in the world. What you will see a lot of cars in the Indian roads. And as of today, when we talk, we have about 28 million vehicles which are more than 15 years old. Now, there's an end-of-life vehicle actually for that. And another 71 million, it will get added in the next 5 years, which means there's a huge potential for these vehicles to get recycled back into steel, and then steel flows into most of the industry, engineering industry, talk about defense industry and all. So the potential is quite big. The way we are focusing is how can we create this entire circularity, from making the vehicles and then actually recycling it, coming into the steel, which is also one part of our portfolio from Mahindra Excello actually, where we are one of the largest in the country in terms of steel processing and components. So we are looking at how can we give back to the industry with the latest manufacturing techniques what we have.
Mr. Parab, coming back to you, we are speaking about Industry 4.0 as well. How are you aligning yourself to Industry 4.0 goals? Digitization, we saw a strong push towards digitization during COVID-19. How is that progressing now? Which are some of the aspects of digitization that you're accelerating in your business?
I would say that many large industrial houses like L&T, we had started our journey more in 2016-17, but it was not moving at a pace which all of us saw when work from home was the need of the hour. Then you had to work with less production capacity, then social distancing. So I would say that it has gathered momentum in pandemic, and having tested the fruit, today at L&T we are working on IIoT, artificial intelligence, end-to-end digital solution to create data lakes, data analytics, and you see gains in safety, you see gains in quality, and also phenomenal improvement in competitiveness.
L&T is actually training people, skilling people in 6 to 8 states across the country. We always say that India has a very large labor workforce. We have the best IT professionals. But when it comes to the skills that are needed for the future, are we generating that kind of talent from our IITs, IIMs? How are you preparing them for the future? And do you feel that this skill gap is in India and something that we need to plug immediately?
Many of these technologies, you don't have many experts. These are the technologies are evolving. As you use more and more, you see more opportunities. So I would say the scale at which you need to skill is so large that a lot of concentrated collective efforts are required. You talked about IITs, NITs, engineering colleges. Unfortunately, see, you need basic disciplines of engineering. You also need the computers, IT. Today's problem, if you see in many of the engineering college, the basic branch of engineering are actually the seats are going vacant. Everybody wants to be in the computer technology, the IT, digital. Now, unless you have a domain knowledge, see, most of these technologies are enabling the business. Now, if you don't have domain knowledge, how are you going to succeed? So I would say that this is something which is a major challenge, not only in India, it is across the globe.
Right. Mr. Saket Chaturvedi, I'd like to ask you about your experience and also taking a cue from what Mr. Parab was saying. When we speak about industrial powerhouses, you think about Germany, you think about France, you think about China, you think about Japan. What would India need to get there? And I'd speak to you from a defense perspective. What are some of the examples that we can implement in order to make ourselves a manufacturing powerhouse in the next 10 years?
What we have seen in our industry, our particular employees and the workers, they're not very sensitive to SOP, which is standard operating procedures. And in this industry, there's no chance of any failure. So sticking to the SOP, in our habit, we had been trying to do fast. And we are very good crisis managers. Somehow we manage the production, and our production, I'm telling at par in general in all the Indian industries. So we have, but when you go to the West, when you go to some developed countries or China, they are very strict on the SOP to be followed. I think that is where the skill development and the culture development is required in the defense industry, in particular the aeronautical.
When it comes to collaboration with the private sector, do you think that is the way to go for the next 10 years when we want to achieve India's ambitions of a Atmanirbhar Bharat?
Yes, of course. Economy of scale is now available. And alone we cannot do. And when we have to be cost effective and when we have to deliver the things on time or the before time, the private sector has to be on board. And we are really working on it. And we have got more than 100 companies who are working with us directly. And the benefit of it is they develop as an aeronautical company and they get all these certifications. So that is a secondary benefit. The whole ecosystem gets developed. They are always on part with us.
Shrikant, if I can get you in this at this stage, I'd like to ask you about, it's often said that when it comes to India's manufacturing and big contracts, it's always a big boys play. Do you feel that very often, despite the fact that today we have almost 1 lakh startups in the country? We have a Startup India program, a lot of focus on new age companies at the level of the center, Niti Aayog, and states as well. Somehow, it's difficult to get into those big manufacturing deals to get your foot into the door.
No, that democratization in terms of everybody able to participate in important contracts has begun. That journey of democratization has definitely begun. Today, we have the GEM portal, the Government e-Marketplace portal, which basically has enabled transparent procurement and transparent participation of multiple big, small companies into key government contracts. in certain areas, could be oil and gas, could be renewable energy, could be even aerospace and defense, for the right reasons, it's still a very closed door kind of a process. But again, these are for the right reasons, in terms of you do not want a financially unstable company, or a company with lesser track record of execution or vintage, as are restricted. But there, I think we have to still do that go that extra mile in terms of defining certain additional parameters in terms of technical capability, or the big and the small can sometimes come together through a consortium bidding process and still, execute the project. So there are definitely innovative ways to further democratize this process, is the way I see it.
All right. So there is more room for democratizing the process. Mr. Khanna, if I were to ask you, if we were to allow these startups or encourage these startups to become manufacturing powerhouses for the future in the next 10, 15, 20 years, what do we need to do now? What would be your advice to some of these startups, some of these unicorns, which are facing funding issues right now? There is global scrutiny, there's a lot of scrutiny by regulators as well. How can they become more resilient and contribute to the Indian growth story in a more sustained and robust manner?
I think important factor for not only startups, but for all businesses, even those who are established and are growing, is the product and the services in which you are. Generally, we also look for shortcuts. Important factor is, for any company, even if it is startup, is the technology in which they are invested in. And then the use of that particular product and services, not only limited to India, but today we are also looking across the world. I won't call it China plus or China minus per se. But if you look across, there are many startups which are there in Asian countries as well as in the South Asian, which are doing phenomenally well. And there are many startups in US which have been doing well. I don't think so funding is that big an issue. The major issue is that how resilient you are, how long you intend to play on this. Is the game is only for a short-term 5-year basis, or you're looking for a sustainable business? Whenever, and most of the companies which have grown, like Tata has been there for 150 years, it's not that there were no ups and downs. Each industry, each business has those cyclic in nature, and there are always pluses and downs. But when you are down, where are you investing in, and how you are looking ahead on your product and services? I think the moment you have it, there is no way that these startups, which are so-called startups, I have seen it in renewables. Around 15 years back, how many companies were there? Were they known? The top 3 or 5 were not there even in the horizon 15 years back. They are doing a great job today because they have invested and people have invested with them. I think the second part is to look ahead. A particular product can only serve a particular shelf life, or a services can only particular shelf life. You have to look ahead and you have to go for a backward and the forward integrations. That, I think, is a vision which the founders need. And we have seen many startups, and I'm very proud to be an engineer or a citizen of this country, where there many startups have been doing, where they are looking for a backward integration as well as forward integration, and have moved beyond what they started with. So I personally feel that India today, and even in manufacturing, if you look around, what a great opportunity this country has for enhancing the manufacturing and coming out with those products which otherwise the big houses or the government, in fact, is not thinking across. If I can give you some examples on it, is even in renewables, there is a huge potential. Even in the energy sector, there is a huge potential for those products which can come across, because not much of the R&D is actually happening in this country. So if you come across those products and have widespread usage, I think there is no way while the funding will ever be an issue on that.
Sumit, let me get you back into the discussion. When we are speaking about EPR rules right now, what the government is right now considering is whether mandates can be set for the auto industry, for auto companies to use a certain percentage of recycled material in new cars. Do you think this is a model that can be replicated across the industry, not just the auto sector? Is recycling white goods also something that you're looking at in Sero? what is the larger economic opportunity in terms of manufacturing that this can bring?
Okay, so that's a very interesting, Parishik. If you look at the auto space, and I'll come on the home appliance part of it. So in the automotive space, basically a lot of materials already, the way it's from the design stage, people have started looking at materials which can be recycled. And, I think that's the first step which, at least in India, I've started seeing. Globally, I think they're much more ahead. And that would change. Steel, of course, can be recycled fully. Steel contributes to about 70%. And then you have the aluminum and you have copper, which is again recycled. I think there are some areas like fluff and all. In many countries, especially in Europe and all, you can actually use it and create some new products out of it. Rubber can be recycled back. So I think the designing stage in India has started where people are looking at sustainable materials, better, and up to 95 to 97% of materials can be recycled in automotive industry. It's going to happen. We don't have a solution for the old cars because we just have to live with it. And I think with the government looking at EPR, and I'm not sure whether they will be really mandating. Maybe they will mandate to the extent saying that whatever was the sales happening in the last 10, 15 years, you have to look at a percentage of that. Not on the mandate side on the materials because it's going to be evolving. But I think on the own automotive OEMs will start looking at doing it more proactively. It's good for them also because they can show a roadmap on the sustainability side. On the home appliance, I think the EPR in one way has already started. And again, there, because and again, to the extent of 90% out there is easily recyclable because most is steel and copper and other things. Maybe the balance thing, especially the e-waste part of it, is really a concern in India. It's still being done in the roadside or not in the best way. Also, the non-ferrous materials can be recycled in much more better way, and especially if you link that with the for the phones and all. There's a lot of e-waste and materials which are available in India, and India is going to be one of the largest, basically users of that. So I think the entire ecosystem has to be developed. As Sero and as Mahindra Excel, we are looking at all these opportunities. The question is, when is the feedstock going to be available? It's also at some point of time we would look at battery recycling, coming for the EVs and all. But the thing is, it's too early for us even to start talking about and looking at investment because the feedstock is still, I think, 5 or 7 years away from where we are.
You have very few electric vehicles.
So just tell about 10,000 vehicles, four-wheelers.
Yes, and we'll wrap it here, but thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. It was a fantastic discussion on how to chart India's destiny for the next 10 years in the manufacturing sector. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.